Welcome back to another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. Today, we have a special memoirist in the room with us. M. Rose Peluso is going to be here. She's going to talk a little bit about her memoir called Behind the Tapestry. So, M. Rose, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Diana. I appreciate it.
This is going to be really an interesting reading. I love hearing authors read their memoirs because more than just a story, it's a personal journey. And that, I think, requires reading directly from the author. So I'm very pleased that you're taking the time to read for us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Let me tell everybody a little bit about you. M. Rose Peluso is a former Catholic religious sister. We call them nuns in the real world.
Right.
Educator and graphic artist. Behind the Tapestry is her debut book. Her poem entitled The Meaning of Friendship was featured in Sparrowgrass Poetry Forum's Poetic Voices of American Anthology, summer 1991. M. Rose holds a B.F.A. from William Paterson University in New Jersey and a master's degree in Pastoral Spiritual Theology from a seminary outside Philadelphia, and she is a certified Christian life coach. She has been a chronic pain sufferer for over 22 years. Her rare, debilitating, intractable condition is known as, is it Pudendal Neuropathy? Pudendal Neuropathy. I'm putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yeah, it's Pudendal, yep.
Emerald has,
do that. That's okay.
Emerald has written this memoir in hopes of helping other chronic pain sufferers. This is God's story as much as it is hers, and she wants to encourage others in their relationship with the Lord. She currently lives in New Jersey on the Jersey Shore with her mother and lovebird Cheeky. Everybody's got to have a companion.
I love her.
I think everybody requires pets in their lives. That's just me. So tell me, what was your favorite thing about writing this book?
I think in a lot of ways, I guess I really wrote it for me. It was very therapeutic to actually, get some stuff down on paper and then to have the perspective. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one thing to live through something like a chronic illness or the time in the convent and then the departure that came, that was necessary when I left the convent, and you're kind of caught up in it. So you don't really see the wisdom in it or the lessons, life lessons that were learned. So getting it all down on paper, even though it was many years after I left the convent, I think I really gleaned some new insights, some new understanding about myself, about people, about life, about, sure, being our own advocates when it comes to, being a chronic pain sufferer and dealing with the medical community for, over 23 years, like I've been doing. So I think that was really a favorite part of it, was to really kind of put things down on paper and then to, look at it and glean a new kind of an understanding. Or
it's kind of like looking at a faded photograph, right?
Yeah, correct.
The reflection you see is sometimes a little different, and you can see it with a little distance perspective and understanding.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that was definitely, it's an interesting question that you asked, because no one's ever really asked me that question before.
Really?
So, I'm surprised that I was able to come up with an answer.
I'm always fascinated by what authors find most rewarding in their work. That always fascinates me.
Yeah, great question. Yeah.
That's the question I ask. Yeah. So, Behind the Tapestry is a compelling true story told from behind convent walls of one woman's struggles to make peace with a mysterious chronic illness and her unfulfilled dream of being a Catholic nun. When you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud.
Okay, thank you, Diana. Appreciate it. Chapter 1. Each chapter begins with a scripture. Chapter 1, but whatever is good and perfect comes to us from God, the creator of all light, and he shines forever without change or shadow. From James chapter 1, verse 17. That fateful day, I found myself standing at a small window. I don't recall how I got there. Waking up that morning was a blur. I went through the motions, but the details escaped me. I stared out the window for the longest time, unsure of what I was feeling. So many thoughts swirled around in my head and my heart. I knew the events of the previous day were monumental, not just for me, but for the whole country and for the world. The implications of just how huge were still unclear, but of one thing I was certain: nothing would ever be the same, not for me or the life I was trying to lead. As I stood at the window, I got completely lost in my own head. I felt chilled to the bone despite the balmy temperature outside. The sun shone so brightly through the window, I needed my sunglasses indoors. Yesterday was much the same. The tragedy that had taken place 24 hours earlier seemed surreal, as many of the interviewed eyewitnesses had attested to. Indeed, this unforeseen tragedy was beyond anything I had ever experienced in my lifetime. The entire country, the government, and its people were stunned. I backed away from the window and gazed at the Hermitage, a tiny cottage resting on 10 acres of hills and valleys, covered by lush green lawns. Ahead was a converted mansion, shaded by evergreen and oak trees, with a welcoming floral garden that stood in contrast to the adjacent dilapidated building that once served as a horse stable. These grounds were nestled on the outskirts of Coconut Grove, New Jersey. I was a novice in a religious community, occupying the Hermitage on one of my required desert days. I valued this time spent alone, just me and my Lord. I usually took advantage of this time to catch up on sleep, quiet my mind, and pray. My visits were sometimes spent complaining to Jesus about my chronic pain, even to the point of crying. I looked forward to them each month, but not on this particular day, the day after America was attacked. Deep in my soul, in parts of myself I hadn't known existed, I knew that everything had changed. Thankfully, my family, friends, and I had not suffered any personal losses, but so many others knew of someone who had perished or lost a loved one that day. And yet the overall devastation felt personal. I was certain God was asking something profound of me as a result of this horrific event. But what could it possibly be? As I spoke to him aloud, I imagined God being bombarded with requests from all kinds of people, even those he created and loved, but had never heard from before. I didn't cry or shed any tears over the tragedy at that moment, because the pain I felt was so deep inside me, it was untouchable. No amount of tears could release my sadness. I needed to know what God was trying to tell me or show me through this tragedy. Somewhere in the chaos was an answer. I took a walk outside to pray the rosary. I begged the Lord to open my eyes and heart so that I could hear him. Shortly into my walk, I felt the presence of the Holy Spirit, giving me a powerful revelation. So strong was the message, my breath was taken away, leaving me lightheaded and in fear of passing out. So I scurried back to the Hermitage and entered the miniature room that seemed even smaller than usual. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I grasped for air and flung myself onto the sofa bed, grabbing for the arms to steady myself. I begged the Lord to help me calm down while I pondered what exactly it was he was asking of me. I asked Jesus to clarify my understanding of what was happening and the implications it would have for my life and my calling. After a few minutes, my breathing returned to normal and my thoughts came back into focus. The revelation became clear. I realized that everything had changed. Nothing was the same, nor would it ever be. I came to understand that the minute details of those who lost their lives that day, their socioeconomic status, how many children they had, their professions, where they lived, in the end, none of that mattered, because in an instant, all of that changed. But one person, one thing remained unchanged by the tragic events: God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I believed in my heart that God was deeply saddened by the devastation unfolding before us, but he had not changed. He would forever be the same, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Knowing this changed everything for me too. I knew I was being called to dedicate my life entirely to him, the only one unchanged by the events of September 11th, 2001. As an adult, I didn't care much for Halloween, but as a child, I was like every other American kid, getting dressed up, being someone else for a day, and getting mounds of candy. What's not to like? However, being a grown woman who lives in a common, why in the world would Halloween appeal to me, right? It was just another day on the calendar. However, working in the educational field, surrounded by hundreds of school-aged children, my love of this weird and whimsical holiday was rekindled. Watching the children show off their colorful costumes and act the parts was priceless. Now, anyone who knows me knows I absolutely love the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, starring Gene Wilder as Willy and Eddie Albertson as Grandpa Joe. Therefore, it didn't come as any surprise that two of my favorite costumes were Oompa Loompas, suits worn by two sixth-grade girls. The costumes were custom made by a friend of one of the girls' mothers, and they were spectacular. As much fun as I had with the girls dressed like Willy Wonka's loyal and trusted helpers, the best part of the day was actually something else. The fun began that morning in the teacher's lounge. Due to Halloween celebrations in the school-wide parade, there was less need of a teacher assistance. Consequently, I sat in the lounge doing paperwork. The pre-kindergarten teacher, Miss Grant, came in and asked if I wanted to borrow her Mrs. Potts costume, the character from Disney's Beauty and the Beast. She suggested I drape it over my habit. Feeling festive, I was thrilled to wear the costume. I must admit, I looked hilarious as a giant teapot with a spout extending from my navel and a bonnet-like tea kettle top over my veil. Anyway, everyone seemed to think I looked cute in it. After donning Miss Grant's costume, I headed back to the teacher's lounge, and to my elation, a bunch of goodies were sprawled out on the table closest to the entrance. The golden rule amongst educators has always been this: any food item left in the teacher's lounge is fair game. If it's lying on the table with no label, name, or classroom indicated, that it's yours, mine, and ours. So I began to help myself to the scrumptious cookies, cupcakes, and candy on display. Boy, did I ever enjoy myself. After a few minutes of indulgence, I went to the main office for something. Along the way, I chit-chatted with the faculty member, admired more of the children's costumes, used the restroom, and finally headed back to the teacher's lounge to finish my paperwork. When I returned, a new treat caught my eye. This particular goodie was especially enticing because it was my all-time favorite, candy corn. Just like the other goodies, this floured paper bowl of candy with no label was covered with clear wrap. I proceeded to peel back one corner of the wrap and dug in. I hadn't treated myself to these yellow, white, and orange sugary candy in ages, so my taste buds danced with every bite. A few minutes later, I left the room again. When I returned, one of the first grade teachers, Miss Lynn, was eyeing the bowl of candy corn. She asked me whose candy it was, and I told her that I had no idea. Apparently, candy corn was also one of Miss Lynn's favorites, so before I knew it, there she was, peeling back another corner of the plastic wrap and grabbing a handful. She commented on how good it tasted and then left the teacher's lounge. Before sitting back down, I dug into the bowl again and scooped up an even larger handful of candy than the first time around. Oh boy, what this yummy candy did for my disposition should have been sinful. Anyway, as I remained seated at the table drinking coffee, eating the candy corn, and finishing up my paperwork, Sister George wandered in. She asked if I had tasted any of the goodies, and I shared that I had tasted the cookies, cupcakes, and my favorite candy corn. Sister George didn't see the bowl at first, but once I pointed it out, she grew a huge smile. And once again, before I knew it, she dug out a hefty handful, so large that pieces of the candy corn began cascading through her fingers. She and I laughed and shared how much we loved the sweet treat. I left the lounge again to use the ladies' room. I took my time, but when I returned, the clear wrap was ripped from the bowl, so I figured others had also helped themselves to the delightful treat. I refilled my coffee mug, helped myself to more candy corn, and sat back down to finally complete my overdue reports. A moment later, my friend Barbie, who was also the teacher's beloved art teacher, entered the room. She called out, "Hey, Sister Mare, what's up?" I looked up from my work and replied, "Yo, Barbie, what's going on? How are you, my friend?" "I'm doing pretty well. How you doing? I love your Mrs. Potts costume. Where'd you get it?" I smiled. "Oh, do you like it? It's really cute, isn't it? Miss Grant let me borrow it. I love that movie, and Mrs. Potts and her son Chip are my favorite characters." I was seated towards the back of the room near the windows that overlooked the parking lot. Barbie was seated near the main entrance of the only door to the room, directly in front of the candy corn. She yelled, "Hey, wow, look at all these treats. Who brought them in?" "Can't say, I have no idea. It was already here when I came in this morning. It all looks yummy, doesn't it? You should try the chocolate chip cookies. They taste good enough to be homemade." "Oh, I don't want to take any if we don't know whose they are," Barbie insisted. I laughed heartily and assured her, "Are you kidding me? This is the teacher's lounge, my friend. Everyone knows by now that if you leave something in here unmarked, it's up for grabs." "So you think it'll be okay if I go ahead and have one of the cookies?" Barbie asked. Just as I inched closer to grab another cookie, she added, "Oh, wait, I didn't see these," as she pointed at the bowl of candy corn. "Whose are they? I just love candy corn. They're my favorite." I noted, "Yep, yours and everyone else's around here." "So did you have any yet? Who brought them in?" Barbie asked. "Oh, how the heck should I know? But who cares? If they're in here and unlabeled, I say help yourself. God knows I did. At least 3 or 4 handfuls so far," I admitted. Barbie displayed an incredulous look, but nonetheless proceeded to help herself to the candy. After eating only a few pieces, her aura emanated pure joy and satisfaction. As we continued to sit and chat, 2 boisterous women who I didn't recognize entered the room. Barbie had her back to them, but because my back was to the windows, I faced the doorway and looked right at them. As soon as they entered, Barbie and I stopped talking. One woman was towering and the other was a bit chunky. The shorter woman practically screamed out in horror as she exclaimed to the other woman, "Oh my gosh, Betty, look at our bowl of candy corn. Who the heck has been eating our candy? I don't believe it. We just put it down here for a few minutes and then we come back and it's almost all gone. Where did it go?" Now understand something. Barbie was my friend, and friends are supposed to have each other's backs, right? Well, in this case, yeah, not so much. Barbie sat there appearing quite stunned, but in total silence. She grinned and looked right at me, keeping her back to the women and still not saying a word. I finally admitted, "Oh, sorry, ladies. Is that candy corn yours? We didn't know. It was just sitting there for more than a few minutes. It's been there a while now, and it wasn't labeled or anything. So some of the faculty members and myself had a little bit of it. Sorry." The stocky woman rebutted. "Ate a little bit of it? Are you kidding me? There seems to be a whole lot more than just a little bit of it missing, right, Betty?" She turned to Betty for confirmation, but Betty stood there, frozen, except for her shrugged shoulders. I continued, "Again, I'm very sorry, ladies, but I wasn't the only one who had some. Sister George and Miss Lynn were in here earlier, and I know for a fact they each had a few pieces. And I haven't been in the room this whole time, so who knows who else might have come in and had a little. But again, I do apologize for whatever I took. I had no idea the candy belonged to anyone. Of course, if I'd known, I never would have eaten it." "Well, where did you think it came from? Did you think it just got here on its own?" Betty finally spoke up. The shorter woman just shook her head back and forth, somewhat violently, while Barbie sat on the sidelines pretending to be hard of hearing. She never attempted to step in or admit to her own part in the apparent crime of the century. It took all the composure I could conjure up to not burst out laughing at the ridiculousness of the whole situation. I answered, "Oh, I don't really know. I mean, I had no idea where the candy corn came from. It's one of my favorites, and so I had a little bit of it." "Well, how much is a little?" the shorter woman asked. "I honestly don't know, to tell you the truth," I said, and then went on, "Not that much. Maybe a small handful or 2. "A small handful? Are you serious? It looks like a lot of the candy is missing, and you supposedly helped yourself to only a handful or 2? She squawked. I just shrugged my shoulders as she went on. "I think it's kind of nuts that you would just take it upon yourself to eat someone else's candy without knowing exactly who it belonged to or where it even came from in the first place. That just seems so crazy to me. Don't you agree, Betty? She looked over at her friend who didn't respond. I gazed at Barbie, who was shaking her head and acting as if she had no idea what was going on. She didn't seem to care that I was taking the heat, not just for myself, but for all the culprits involved. I had nothing else to say, so I put my head down and went back to my paperwork. The two women lingered a while longer, debating about what to do with the remaining candy. After some eternal laughter, I asked, "Is there really a problem with the candy? I mean, we honestly didn't know who it belonged to, and certainly didn't eat it on purpose. If we'd known it was yours, we wouldn't have eaten any of it. But now that we know, is it really that big of a deal?" Well, this was a loaded question because the shorter woman yelled at me with more than a hint of disdain in her voice. Yes, it most certainly is a big deal. That wasn't just for the party in Mrs. Burns' sixth grade classroom, you know. That candy corn was all counted out for a contest. The children were supposed to guess how many pieces were in the bowl. I gulped and quickly diverted my attention to Barbie, who looked like she was about to fall right out of the chair. She sprung from her seat and excused herself. Racing for the door, she nearly collided with both women. Mortified, I wanted to crawl under the table and stay there for the rest of the afternoon. Instead, I apologized profusely and reminded them that I didn't take that much. I also added that there was still plenty of candy corn left for the game. The mothers did an abrupt about-face, ranting and raving along the way. Since Mrs. Burns' classroom was across from the teacher's lounge, I heard one of the mothers announce to the teacher and the entire class, "I have no idea who the heck she is. Never seen her before. Don't know her name. But that nun ate our candy. She ate all of the candy corn needed for our game today. Can you believe it? She ate it all. How rude. She didn't even try to find out who it belonged to. She just helped herself. How dare she?" As I remained alone in the teacher's lounge with the sin of the century staining my soul for all of eternity, I snickered to myself. I mean, I really did feel bad, but it was somewhat comical, pretty darn hysterical if you ask me. When the story traveled around the school and Sister George and Miss Lynn learned of the crime, like Barbie, they never fessed up. I became their scapegoat, the sole owner of guilt in the eyes of both mothers. What took place the following day was almost as funny as the incident itself. Practically everyone in the school learned about what that awful nun did to the sixth graders. That morning, I entered the school through the side entrance, which led down a lengthy corridor to the main office. Lo and behold, plastered all over the walls were most wanted posters asking the public's help in capturing the year's most notorious criminal and offering a reward for her apprehension. A mugshot of the candy corn thief was smack in the middle of the 8 by 11-inch posters, and it was uncanny how much she resembled me. Hey, wait a minute. It was me. Posters positioned about 10 inches apart lined every hallway leading to the teacher's lounge. One poster after another displayed my mugshot with Mrs. Potts' teapot plopped on top of my veil. I got the biggest kick out of this and laughed hysterically for several minutes. I later learned that it was the sixth grade teacher's idea to design and hang up the posters. Just about everyone, students and faculty alike, thought the posters were the cutest things ever. At the end of the day, when I returned to the convent, I stopped in the chapel before going to my room. I just had to kneel and pray to thank the Lord for the joy and laughter the whole candy corn fiasco brought me. I believe the Lord was telling me through this silly ordeal that life can still be enjoyable, and it was possible to experience moments of lightheartedness even in the midst of my chronic pain. And for all of this, I was eternally grateful to him. The epilogue. Let not your heart be troubled. Your trust in God, now trust in me. There are many homes up there where my Father lives, and I'm going to prepare them for your coming. November 30th, 2010, and every year thereafter is the anniversary of my first profession of vows. Even though I didn't remain in the common, I still think of this day, November 30th, as my profession anniversary. I still count the years, months, and days since leaving the Coconut Grove Franciscan Sisters, and I still treasure the gift of being set apart for Christ within a religious community for all those years. That gift lives in me and will never die. As I'm sure you can imagine, life since leaving the common has neither been easy nor perfect, but that's okay because Jesus never promised us perfection in this life. His life on earth by our standards was anything but. Over the past decade, I've come to discover so much about myself, chronic pain, Pudendal neuropathy, and the integral role of family, friends, and faith in navigating the challenges of life on this earth. I like to think that that knowledge I've gained has made me a wiser person, better able to impart that knowledge on those who follow. I know for sure that I am better equipped now to offer understanding, forgiveness, compassion, and the love of Christ to those in need. So much has happened to me in my life since that mid-June day back in 2007. Along with my master's degree, I became certified through the Diocese of Trenton in the pastoral care of the sick and dying. A few years after that, I became a certified Christian life coach. Following the death of my father in 2012, and after working for the Northern New Jersey parish for over 5 years, I took another pastoral parish ministerial position at a church closer to my home, where my mother and I still take care of each other. At the time of this writing, I am no longer working in full-time church ministry. I now work part-time caring for an elderly neighbor. I continue treatment with my awesome and brilliant pain management specialist, and today I am thankfully feeling pretty good. The pain caused by my PN is under control, and this pleases me very much. The road to this point hasn't been without its challenges, but the Lord has continually been good to me. He was with me throughout my 8 years in the convent and has been with me throughout the 13 years since leaving. No doubt he will be with me for the remainder of my years here on earth. So for those of you reading this memoir who are struggling through some dark time in your life, hang in there. Don't ever give up. No matter what your pain may be, whether it's physical pain, such as the kind caused by a chronic illness like Pudendal neuropathy, whether it's the pain of a failed marriage, the loss of a loved one, or the breakup of a cherished friendship, whatever it may be, it doesn't have to take over your life as long as you cling to the Lord and allow him to cling to you. If you let him, Jesus Christ will see you through. Always remember that our life here on earth is relatively short. We are not meant to live forever. We are only sojourners passing through. Remember what I shared from Dr. Negedy's class, that we are outfitted for heaven. We spend our life here on earth preparing for our union with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in eternal life. Challenges and struggles are plentiful as we live out our lives. Jesus, too, endured pain and hardships typical of his time in history. But remember, when we crouch in the corner, we're only seeing the back. We're only seeing a small part of the wider picture. Someday, Jesus will take us gently by the hand and bring us to the other side, where we will take in the whole picture, the front of the picture, where beauty abounds, the details of our life woven together, a creation of our own in union with our Creator. So whatever is going on in your life, don't ever forget where you are right now. Remember, you won't always be there. Someday you will be on the other side. But in the meantime, while you wait for the Lord to finish outfitting you for heaven, try to enjoy as much of your life here on earth as best as you can behind the tapestry. God bless.
Very nice. Thank you. This sounds like a really
Thank you, Diana.
interesting book. I love the story you told about the candy corn. That's hysterical.
Yeah, it was pretty, this 15 years, it's been 15 years since I left a comment. Every time I see candy corn on a decoration, Halloween decoration, or a card, or just actually see the candy, I automatically am drawn back to that day. It was
Sure.
it was definitely memorable for sure.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you came to share your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I hope that when you write your next book, you'll come and share it with us again.
Thank you, Diane. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Have a nice night.
You too. Thank you so much.